June 12, 2007, 10 a.m., St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Church, Bend, Oregon. 28 years earlier, June 12, 1979, 5:40 p.m., 4 nuns vanished after a retreat check at Our Lady of the Pines Chapel in the Deschutes National Forest. Father Michael Arroyo led their memorial each year. One of the missing was his sister, Sister Clara Arroyo, aged 23 in 1979. What happened to Clara and the 3 women who were with her? 28 years later, a detail near the old chapel site will force a new search. It begins with a sound no one expects. Something is wrong underground. The nave was half full. Most faces were the same faces as last year. Programs listed the names: Sister Margaret Doyle, 68. Sister Helen Price, 65. Sister Anna Morales, 28. Sister Clara Arroyo, 23. The official record said missing, presumed deceased. The file still had no primary scene, no recovered property, no trace evidence. The drive out to the chapel back then was short. The search that followed went for weeks and found nothing. The service ended at 10:27 a.m. Father Michael stepped to the doors to greet parishioners. Condolences were brief. People in Bend know this case. He kept his tone even. He avoided promises. He looked at the framed photo near the candles. It showed the 4 women on a bench outside the small white chapel 3 days before they disappeared. The pine line behind them matched the ridge east of Skyliners Road. After the last handshake, he went to his office. He logged the date and time in his notebook, as he always did. He pulled the 1979 map from a drawer. A blue pen traced the route from town to the forest gate. He had not stepped on that ground in more than 20 years. The chapel was sold and torn down in the early 1980s. The land is private now. He knew that. He also knew the drive takes 19 minutes if traffic is clear. He locked the office at 11:05 a.m. He took the photo, the map, and his keys. He told the receptionist he would be back by late afternoon. He did not explain why today felt different. He turned right onto Franklin Avenue and headed west toward the tree line that had swallowed a case. On the front seat, the old photo slid and stopped. He did not move it. He listened. The forest will answer a question the city could not. Father Michael Arroyo was 48 in 2007. He entered seminary at 24, 2 years after the disappearance. He kept a paper log of every call, every tip, and every mass said in their names. He taught catechism on Wednesdays and visited hospitals on Fridays. He did not talk about June 12, 1979, unless asked. Clara Arroyo was his younger sister. She was 23 in 1979. She joined the Sisters of St. Bridget at 21. She played the organ, kept maintenance ledgers for the small chapel, and favored blue ink pens. Margaret Doyle was 68. She ran literacy classes at the Bend Library Annex and organized winter coat drives. Helen Price was 65. She cooked for retreats and tracked grocery receipts to the St. Anna Morales was 28. She handled youth choir rehearsals and drove the car most days. All 4 were adults with clear duties, separate keys, and written schedules. Their last known photo was taken June 9, 1979, outside Our Lady of the Pines. The ridge behind them aligns with USGS Map 10T. The bench appears on a 1977 maintenance note. Routine mattered. They delivered communion to shut-ins on Mondays. They made supply runs on Thursdays after noon prayer. On the retreat week, they planned 2 nights at the chapel to inspect cracked plaster and a leaking eave. Parish records show a tool list signed out at 4:55 p.m. on June 12, 1979, 1 ladder, 2 chisels, a tar bucket, and a hand drill. The drill never came back. Neither did the ladder. Friends described Clara as direct. She logged mileage, saved gas receipts, and always called her brother after sunset drives. Telephone records for June show weekly calls at 8:15 p.m., except the week they vanished. A bank statement shows $20 withdrawn by Anna at 1:12 p.m. on June 12 from a Bend Credit Union ATM on Greenwood Avenue. The slip was found years later in a parish file. If you follow cases like this, subscribe so you don't miss the legal steps we are about to cover. This case turns on schedules, receipts, and one stubborn pattern. The pattern held for months, then stopped at dusk on a Tuesday. One quiet habit of Clara will matter more than anyone guessed. Father Michael drove west at 11:12 a.m., taking Franklin Avenue to Skyliners Road. Traffic was light. The forest line stayed fixed against a clear sky. He kept the 1979 photo on the passenger seat. A folded USGS map sat under it. He reached the turnoff near mile marker 8 and pulled onto a gravel shoulder. The dirt spur he remembered was gone. In its place stood a steel gate, a keypad, and a fresh private property sign. A camera dome watched the approach. The white chapel no longer existed. The clearing had been reshaped and planted. He checked the parcel number on notes he had copied years earlier. Deschutes County records listed a transfer on May 6, 1981, from the diocese to a limited liability company. The company later dissolved into a personal trust with a Bend mailing address. He wrote the names, dates, and the instrument number in his notebook. A second sign near the fence edge warned about dogs. The fence was 8 feet high and ran tight along uneven ground. He called Walter Keene, the retired caretaker. At 11:26 a.m. Walter had maintained the chapel until the closure. He confirmed the timeline. The diocese decommissioned the building after a structural review in 1980. A sale followed. Demolition occurred within weeks. Walter said he salvaged a brass cross and several ledgers. He offered to show them later in the day. He also mentioned complaints from nearby residents in 1983 about late-night machinery. The county called those tremors minor seismic activity and closed the file. Father Michael walked the public side of the fence for 40 yards. He used a handheld compass to align the 1979 photo with the tree line. The ridge angle matched. The old bench would have sat east of the chapel, where new shrubs were now trimmed low. He saw a thin rectangle of metal near the soil, half hidden by clippings. He noted its position, distance from the gate, and the direction of the slope. He did not step onto the property. He kept recording details, dates, and geometry. He stood still and listened. The wind moved the pines above the ridge. A different sound came from ground level. He crouched at the fence line and listened. The wind was light. A second sound came from the soil, not the trees. It was faint and rhythmic, like a low hymn filtered through earth. He marked the position in his notebook, 15 paces south of the gate, 2 paces west of the fence post with yellow paint. He did not cross the line. He dialed 911 at 11:39 a.m. He reported a possible person underground near a former chapel site on Skyliners Road. The dispatcher asked if anyone was in danger. He said he heard a sustained tone and a cough. She sent deputies. Deschutes County units arrived at 11:54 a.m. Deputy Renee Caldwell took his statement. Deputy Tom Hatcher walked the public side of the fence with him. Both heard the same faint tone after 40 seconds of quiet. Hatcher noted a metal grate 6 inches inside the fence. It was old and rusted and partly covered by clippings. Caldwell used the intercom at the gate to contact the owner. A male voice identified himself as Gordon Whitaker. He said the property was private and fenced for a reason. He denied any underground room and refused consent to search. Caldwell explained the welfare concern. Whitaker said to call his attorney and ended the call. Caldwell radioed the watch commander and requested guidance on an emergency warrant. Hatcher photographed the grate through the fence and used a laser rangefinder to document distance from the road. Father Michael called Walter Keene at 12:07 p.m. Walter confirmed that the chapel had no basement before demolition. He also repeated reports of night machinery in 1983. Caldwell returned from her patrol car at 12:12 p.m. She had spoken with a judge on call. If they could document an audible human indicator, she could seek a telephonic warrant. They waited. The tone returned, then broke into a dry, shallow cough. Caldwell recorded 22 seconds of audio on her body camera. A second call went to Whitaker at 12:20 p.m. He still refused. Caldwell began the affidavit, reading the location, the audio, and the risk of medical distress. Hatcher walked the fence again and pointed toward a stand of trimmed shrubs. A small shed sat 50 yards up the drive, half hidden by new trees. Something inside that shed did not match the landscaping. Deputy Renee Caldwell began a checklist. The grate was antique cast iron, not hardware store stock. It sat 6 inches inside the fence, aligned to nothing above ground. Landscaping clippings hid half the frame. The gate camera pointed toward the road, not the shrubs. A second dome by the driveway faced the house, not the fence line. The owner, Gordon Whitaker, insisted it was a drainage cover. Caldwell noted there was no visible culvert, no catch basin, and no slope graded to feed it. Deputy Tom Hatcher called county utilities at 12:28 p.m. The parcel showed small, steady power use for years, then irregular spikes in 1983. The spikes occurred between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., 3 nights in a row. A clerk emailed the legacy readouts. Hatcher printed them in the patrol car. The owner's trust pulled permits in 1981 to demolish the chapel and install irrigation. No permit existed for excavation or underground structures. The assessor's sketches from 1984 listed no basement. At 12:36 p.m., Caldwell recorded a second audio clip. The tone rose, paused, and broke into 2 coughs. She tagged the file, marked direction with a compass, and measured distance from the road to the grate with a laser. Father Michael called Walter Keene again and put him on speaker. Walter confirmed the chapel slab was monolithic. He kept ledgers with the pour date, the aggregate batch, and the supplier's invoice. He offered to bring the books to the scene. Caldwell photographed the private property sign and the dog warning. She also photographed a newer no trespassing, armed response placard that did not match the original gate hardware. An intercom check brought Whitaker back on the line. He repeated that no one was on his land without a warrant. Caldwell told him a judge was reviewing a telephonic application based on a possible medical emergency. He replied that he would meet deputies at the front door only. Hatcher scanned the driveway through the fence. The shed's roofline looked new, but the siding had fake weathering. A padlock hung on the door, polished on the bottom edge. Something had rubbed it often. The ground in front of the shed showed fresh rake marks, but a thin seam in the boards reflected sunlight. If that seam is a cut line, the yard is hiding stairs. The telephonic warrant cleared at 12:44 p.m. Deputies opened the gate and drove to the shed. Father Michael stayed at the road. Caldwell photographed the padlock, hinges, and fresh rake lines. Hatcher tapped the floorboards. A dull echo came from the center bay. He removed for screws hidden under a narrow batten strip. The boards lifted as one square panel. A stairwell dropped into rock. They switched to body cameras and headlamps. The steps were cut into basalt and worn at the center. At the bottom sat a heavy door with a corroded hasp. No keypad. No modern latch. Hatcher found a key in a shallow niche in the stone. The key turned on the second try. The door opened into a narrow corridor braced with timber. The air was dry and stale. A single vent pipe ran toward the fence line. The passage angled northeast, the direction of the former chapel. Caldwell marked distances every 20 feet with chalk. 40 yards in, the corridor widened into a small room. A thin pallet lay against the wall. A table held a tin cup and a spoon. A braided cord hung like a makeshift rosary. Crosses were carved into soft wood scraps and fixed with twine. Caldwell announced herself and asked if anyone could hear her. A faint voice answered from the dark corner. It was hoarse and careful. She said her name. Clara Arroyo. She said it twice. Caldwell approached slowly and kept her light low. The woman was conscious and extremely thin. Her hair was cut short. She shielded her eyes from the lamp. Caldwell noted a shallow, persistent cough. Medics were called at 12:58 p.m. Oxygen and blankets were staged at the stairwell. Caldwell asked if anyone else was present. Clara looked toward another alcove. Hatcher's camera found a second pallet and a covered shape. He paused. He noted probable human remains without disturbing the covering. The room's walls carried lines and dates scratched into wood. Paramedics entered at 1:03 p.m. They applied oxygen and checked vitals. Caldwell documented the scene and the position of each object. Hatcher mapped the tunnel back toward the shed. Clara asked one question in a whisper. She wanted to know the date. There was still another door farther down the corridor. Clara arrived at St. Charles Bend at 1:21 p.m. Paramedics reported low blood pressure, shallow respirations, and a persistent cough. Intake labs showed severe anemia, vitamin D deficiency, and dehydration. Dr. Lila Chen ordered isolation precautions and limited light exposure. Visitors required gowns, gloves, and masks. Father Michael saw her at 2:05 p.m. for 3 minutes. He identified her by a small scar near the left eyebrow and a chipped canine. Deputy Renee Caldwell recorded the first brief interview at 3:12 p.m. It lasted 9 minutes by hospital policy. Caldwell asked only foundational questions. Clara confirmed her full name and date of birth. She recognized Father Michael without prompts. She said she had been underground a long time. She asked the date again and repeated it softly. She stated that others had been with her at first. She named Helen and Margaret. She could not confirm their outcomes. She mentioned cold seasons counted by marks on wood. Caldwell filmed the marks earlier. Clara described 2 distinct rooms separated by a short corridor. Food arrived on a tray from the corridor door. Water came in reused glass bottles. There was a vent overhead that carried voices from above. She used a braided cord for prayer and to mark days. She said she tried to sing at set times. She stopped speaking twice to cough. Dr. Chen paused the interview to adjust oxygen and give sips of water. Caldwell showed a photo of the 1979 bench picture. Clara identified Anna by name. She whispered that Anna always drove. She recalled a ladder and a bucket checked out from the parish that afternoon. She remembered unlocking the chapel's east door for airflow. She remembered a knock after dusk. She did not describe violence. She did not name a captor. She said the knock came with a friendly voice and a thermos. Chain of custody began for the cord rosary at 3:29 p.m. A forensic nurse photographed Clara's hands, wrists, and ankles for healed injuries only. No invasive questions were asked. Clara asked a question as Caldwell stepped away. She wanted to know if the chapel was still standing. Caldwell learned there was another chamber beyond the alcove. Deputies secured the shed and posted the stairwell while the house search continued. Gordon Whitaker repeated that the drain cover was part of an irrigation upgrade. He said any tunnel predated his ownership. Deschutes County records showed no pre-existing subsurface structure in 1979 or 1980. An assessor sketch from 1984 again listed no basement. The chapel slab report, signed in 1977, described one continuous pour with no voids. That document undercut the idea of a forgotten cellar. Caldwell logged contradictions. The grate sat 6 inches inside the fence, not near a drain line. No gravel swale led toward it. The vent pipe in the tunnel ran directly to that grate, not to a French drain. Camera angles favored the driveway and the road, not the shrubs concealing the grate. The padlock on the shed was polished along the lower edge where a hand would steady it while lifting floor panels. Fresh rake lines masked a cut seam in the boards. A second seam ran perpendicular under stack pots. A prosecutor on call reviewed probable cause at 1:25 p.m. The theory was narrow: a concealed structure, a person in distress, and a property owner blocking access. Defense claims were predictable. Whitaker could argue the tunnel was historical or unknown to him. Utilities data complicated that claim. Power spikes in 1983 appeared after demolition permits and before the trust shifted names. Nighttime usage matched reported machinery noise that year. If the tunnel was old, why the late-night spikes after purchase? Walter Keane arrived with ledgers at 1:31 p.m. He logged the 1977 delivery ticket, the aggregate batch, and the cure schedule. He also logged a 1981 salvage list. No subfloor vents or hatches appeared in any entry. Caldwell photographed the pages and returned them. She requested foundation photos from parish archives to show the slab edge and the footprint. She asked for county permit microfilm for 1981 to 1984 to check for after-the-fact filings. The next conflict was tactical. Search the corridor beyond the alcove now, or clear the house first. Command chose to split teams, hold the line, and wait on additional medics. Father Michael stood by the road and watched the tree line. A detail in Walter's ledger would force someone to answer under oath. The microfilm rolls arrived from Deschutes County at 2:04 p.m. Caldwell viewed permit cards from 1981 to 1984. She found demolition and irrigation entries, nothing for excavation. A separate reel held complaint logs. 3 calls in May 1983 reported heavy machinery noise near Skyliners Road between 11:30 p.m. and 2 a.m. The responding deputy had marked them likely seismic. Caldwell flagged the page for the case file. Walter Keane's ledgers added a new detail. A 1979 maintenance note listed a bench repair east of the chapel. Measurements on that page matched the distance from the grate to the fence. He also logged a brass cross removed in 1981 and stored in a rectory closet. Caldwell photographed the cross later. Fine scratches formed a short line of marks grouped in sevens. It looked like someone tracked weeks. The pattern ended midway through a row. A utility clerk emailed high-resolution reads at 2:29 p.m. The parcel showed baseline draws under 300 watts most months. Spikes to 6.1 kilowatts appeared on May 17, 18, and 20, 1983, each after midnight. The trust's billing address changed 7 days later. Caldwell printed the series and marked the times. Hatcher retrieved sales records from a Bend hardware store. A cash sale on May 16, 1983, listed ventilation pipe, wood bracing, and a stone chisel. The buyer used no loyalty account. The receipt had faint grease that preserved the imprint of a second sheet. Detectives searching the main house at 2:41 p.m. found a locked file drawer in a basement office. A key on a leather fob opened it. Inside were parcel maps, contractor business cards, and a lined notebook. The first pages were ordinary maintenance notes. Deeper in the notebook, entries began in early 1983. They referenced night crews, haul after midnight, and cover seams with rakes. One page mentioned a pipe to bench line, matching Walter's note. Another page listed a 4-letter code that matched Whitaker's trust name. Caldwell bagged the notebook and logged the time. A small envelope lay under the notebook. Inside was a camera photo from June 1979. The bench appeared in the frame. 4 women sat in a row. Someone had circled Clara's face in blue ink. The district attorney approved arrest at 3:18 p.m. Deputies took Gordon Whitaker into custody without incident in the driveway. He was advised of his rights. He asked for an attorney and did not answer questions. A judge signed a search warrant for the residence and all outbuildings. Detectives expanded the scene log and added a second property clerk. Evidence tags reached triple digits by early evening. Prosecutors drafted initial charges before booking. Counts included aggravated kidnapping, first-degree unlawful imprisonment, and assault in the second degree. A count for abuse of a vulnerable adult was added based on Clara's medical condition. A special allegation cited concealment within a custom-built structure. The complaint referenced the body-worn camera audio of the him and cough. It also cited the notebook, the 1983 power spikes, the microfilm complaints, and the photo with Clara circled in blue. Defense counsel arrived at 5:02 p.m. He argued his client bought the property years after the disappearance. He claimed any tunnel predated the purchase and was unknown to Whittaker. Prosecutors answered with the hardware receipt dates, the utility spikes, and the ledger entry, pipe to bench line. They also reference raked seams on the shed floor that matched the notebook. The judge denied a release request and set a no bail hold pending a preliminary hearing. Detectives documented a second corridor at 5:27 p.m. A locked door opened with a second key found in the office file. The room was empty but furnished. A mattress, a chair, and a table sat under a vent pipe. A nail line on the wall showed positions where small carvings once hung. The dust outlines matched the shapes found in the first chamber. Photos and measurements were taken, then the room was sealed. At the hospital, Dr. Lila Chen provided a written update at 6:12 p.m. Clara's oxygen saturation improved with treatment. She remained in isolation, alert in short intervals, and oriented to person and place. The forensic nurse photographed her rosary and returned it to her on instruction. Father Michael stood outside the unit and waited for the next allowable visit. A final envelope in the office drawer held a single index card. On it, a date had been written and erased many times. Jury selection began on March 8, 2010, in Deschutes County Circuit Court. The panel heard a narrow case theory. A concealed tunnel, a living victim, and a pattern of concealment after purchase. Opening statements ran 40 minutes each. Prosecutors promised proof that Gordon Whittaker built and used the structure. The defense said the tunnel predated his ownership and that memory and records were unreliable after decades. The state called Deputy Renee Caldwell first. She walked the jury through the shed, the floor seam, and the stairwell. Jurors watched body camera video showing the door, the timbers, and the vent pipe. The audio clip captured a faint him and 2 coughs. Deputy Tom Hatcher mapped the corridor and marked the distance to the grate. He explained the padlock wear and the rake lines that had cut boards. A utility analyst testified about the 1983 power spikes. He explained baseline draw and the 3 late-night peaks. A county records clerk authenticated complaint logs of machinery noise the same week. A structural engineer testified that the chapel slab in 1977 had no voids. He said the tunnel was cut after demolition and braced with modern lumber. Walter Keane authenticated parish ledgers and the bench measurements that matched the grate line. Detectives described the office drawer. Jurors saw the photo of the 4 women with Clara circled in blue. They read notebook entries that mentioned hall after midnight, cover seams with rakes, and a pipe to bench line. Dr. Lila Chen explained Clara's condition in neutral terms. She described isolation precautions, malnutrition, and light sensitivity. Clara testified for 11 minutes on March 16. The judge limited questions to identity, dates, and routine. She confirmed her name, her sister relationship to Father Michael, and her presence underground for years. She identified the cord rosary as hers. She did not describe acts of violence. The defense did not cross-examine her. The defense called a contractor who claimed tunnels existed from early logging days. On cross, he conceded no permits, photos, or maps supported that claim on this parcel. The defense argued contamination in chain of custody. The judge found the handling adequate under the rules. The jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts on March 22, 2010. Sentencing was set 2 weeks later. Sentencing took place on April 5, 2010. The court imposed consecutive terms for aggravated kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and assault. The parole board was removed from the equation by statute. Gordon Whittaker received life plus additional fixed years for enhancements tied to concealment. The judge ordered forfeiture of the parcel and an injunction to seal the tunnel under state supervision. A restitution plan covered medical costs and long-term care for Clara Arroyo. The court allowed the rosary to remain with her as personal property. Forensics moved slower. The medical examiner recovered partial remains from the first alcove. Dental records and mitochondrial DNA matched Sister Anna Morales. The manner of death was listed as undetermined due to condition of remains. The other 2 women, Margaret Doyle and Helen Price, were not found on the parcel despite ground-penetrating radar and core sampling. A coroner's inquest later concluded probable deaths in 1980 to 1981 based on the tunnel's timelines and Clara's brief statements about cold seasons. Death certificates issued in 2011 allowed families to settle estates and place markers. Civil actions followed. The families filed wrongful death suits against Whitaker and his trust. A separate claim targeted the diocese for negligent disposal of the chapel site. That case settled under confidentiality with a statement of regret but no admission of liability. Another suit alleged the county mishandled the 1983 machinery complaints. A jury found no liability after a 5-day trial, citing limited resources and the records of the time. The parcel transferred to the county under the forfeiture order. The tunnel was documented, then backfilled. A small memorial stone now sits near Skyliners Road with the 4 names and the year 1979. Clara remained at St. Charles Ben through the summer. Dr. Lila Chen coordinated a slow reintroduction to normal light and diet. Social workers arranged secure housing attached to the hospital campus. Father Michael visited within the strict schedule. She asked for updates on the case but declined media contact. She gave one recorded statement in October 2010 to preserve testimony. It focused on routine, the vent, the tray, and the calendar line she carved.